Welcome back, everyone. It's another Epimetheus video. It's called The Copper Age Explained. By the way, I'm going to sound so stupid, but I don't care. I really don't care. I didn't even know there was a Copper Age. I did not know there was a Copper Age. I knew there was a Stone Age. I knew that there was a Bronze Age. I knew there was an Iron Age, but I did not know there was a Copper Age. Let's jump right in. I'm glad you're here.
The Copper Age, also known as the Chalcolithic period,
Chalcolithic. Okay.
lasted for more than 1,000 years. In this prehistoric era of humanity's past, simple written symbols began to develop into writing, and prehistory slowly transitioned into ancient history. The Copper Age falls between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age.
Oh. Okay.
These ages occurred at different times in different places, but generally followed the same order of development, from stone to copper, then bronze, and then on to iron. The Copper Age is often called the Chalcolithic, which is derived from the Greek words for copper and stone. This emphasizes the fact that stone tools were still widely used alongside copper ones throughout the period. The line between the Copper and the Bronze Ages is also pretty blurry, as copper and bronze were both commonly used alongside each other as well, and the adoption of bronze occurred at different times in different places. The Age of Bronze saw the rise of humanity's first great empires, like those of Sumer, Akkad, Egypt, and Babylon. The building blocks for these civilizations were assembled in the Copper Age and the Stone Age. Important innovations, like the domestication of crops and farm animals, as well as inventions like the bow and arrow and pottery, occurred in the earlier Stone Ages.
Okay, that's good context. Did not know that. In terms of like periods and when some of these things took place. So a lot of husbandry as well as agriculture began to kindle in the Stone Age, as well as some of the beginnings of like your hunter-gatherer tools, as well. So the Copper Age, though, it's kind of like that middle ground between civilization and, I mean, there is like some, like I said, there is kindling of civilization in the Stone Age when you have that domestication and that agriculture, meaning that you would have to dwell in certain areas for those crops to be planted, right? So you would have to dwell, but I'm guessing they're more spread out in terms of like these individual families, groups, tribes, nations that are doing this. So my curiosity is, what is the difference between those dwellings? And when I say dwellings, I'm thinking in like large terms, like villages or tribes or peoples that are in certain places. What is the big difference between the Stone Age, the Copper Age, and the Bronze Age in terms of that? What is the distinction there in terms of those dwellings?
These advancements along the technology tree enabled the growth of ever larger settlements. Hamlets grew into villages, which expanded into towns. The largest settlements of the Neolithic period, like Chalcolithic and Jericho, had
Jericho definitely is one of the oldest cities of all time. That was the Stone Age?
populations of a few thousand people, in contrast to these large settlements, which had their time of growth and then decline. Most of the other larger settlements that have been discovered from this period seem to have only numbered a few hundred people on the high end. These smaller settlements were far more typical and numerous throughout the Fertile Crescent, especially in northern Mesopotamia. The early farming cultures of the region, like the widespread
Halaf
culture, practiced a basic form of farming called dry farming that relied on rainwater and good weather. It is possibly the Halaf or the nearby Husana culture that was the first to smelt metal, as a few copper and lead artifacts have been found at their sites. There is also around the same time evidence of copper mining in what is now Israel, and in far-off Serbia there are a few copper artifacts that have also been unearthed that may be the oldest yet found. There are also very old copper artifacts found from the pre-Harappan Indus Valley, which may indicate multiple places around the world discovered copper smelting independently.
Interesting. Could be independently. We also know that people can travel, especially we were very nomadic early on, and distances like this, could it be traversed? Um, I think there's these ancient roads between Europe, Asia, the Near East, etc., have always been over exaggerated in terms of not sorry, under exaggerated and underestimated in terms of how old they actually are. We know that human migration came from Africa primarily, and we know that people moved pretty quickly through decades and hundreds of years. So why wouldn't they be trading at this time? Why couldn't they be trading? So I think that's probably more likely the case. It it's hard for me to imagine that they're all independently doing something without a knowledge transfer. When I say trade, I don't just mean trade material, trade secrets as well. It seems like there's more likely than not a possibility that these old people, I call them old people, old because they were old a long time ago. These old people most likely had a knowledge share from something. And that knowledge share allowed them to either take, you know, mass excavation pilgrimage with each other to these places, which allowed them to garner the materials, or in practice, they knew about this metal and they knew what to look for.
Just as it appears to have independently developed in East Asia, West Africa, and the Americas a little later. It is important to note that precisely dating any artifacts from this far back in our distant past is extremely difficult, and often the subject of debate. Whatever the case may be, over the course of many centuries, copper smelting technology slowly improved and spread throughout the greater Near East. So why is copper the first metal age almost everywhere? One reason copper, along with lead and gold, are often the first metal for men to melt is because they are all quite pretty. Copper ore oxidizes and turns many attractive shades of green, which helps it stand out from many less useful rocks. Another reason is its relatively low melting point compared to iron. And a third reason is copper is one of the more plentiful metals found on Earth. It's not found everywhere, but it is found in many places. So, why was copper a better material than stone for many tools? One of copper's key benefits over stone tools has made it difficult to determine exactly when the Copper Age began, and when and where did copper tools first become widespread. Reason number 1, you can recycle it. Copper jewelry could be melted down and reworked into weapons of war. And in times of peace, these could be reworked into farming, construction, or mining tools. In these early days of metallurgy, copper objects were rare and precious.
So durable.
Copper would have been passed down from father to son as an inheritance, and taken away as spoils of war. As copper smelting technology improved, and the population of the Near East increased, many of the earliest copper objects were undoubtedly recycled many times over the generations, which contributes to the limited number of Copper Age finds. Also, the geopolitical situation in that area of the world over the last couple of decades has made archaeological research there quite difficult. Another one of copper's advantages over the wide variety of previously predominant fancy rocks that were used is that it was well balanced between its toughness and ability to hold an edge. Stones like obsidian and flint, which were used for arrowheads and small blades, were very sharp, sharper than copper, but they were also very brittle, which made them prone to shatter. Many of the stones used for axes were tougher, but couldn't hold an edge as well as copper, and were still brittle when compared to copper. Producing a stone blade or a polished axe was a very labor-intensive, time-consuming process, which required a great deal of patience and skill, and many hours of chipping or grinding, which could potentially end in disaster.
So economically, it's not even copper's better in this case, because economically for time and the use of the material, even though when I say economically, they're not thinking like that at all. It's more resourcefulness.
During manufacture or use, a shattered stone would have erased many hours of work. In contrast, copper, which is more malleable, is far more likely to bend than to break. With a little bit of hammering, a bent copper tool could be quickly repaired, or a severely damaged copper tool could be melted down and recast into something else.
Very true. Wow, yeah.
Or the same thing, and no material would be lost. As copper tools gained in popularity throughout the Near East, less people were specializing in the manufacture and trade of stone tools. Consequently, the quantity and quality of stone tools at Copper Age sites decreased. Because copper tools were more efficient, it freed up more of the population to specialize in other occupations. At the same time as when copper was first becoming more widely used, two more important innovations were introduced: the potter's wheel, which made the production of pottery less time-consuming, and irrigation.
Yeah, the irrigation part really is going to boost civilization. I guess maybe that is going to parlay us into the Bronze Age, right? The irrigation.
Before irrigation, southern Mesopotamia had been sparsely inhabited. The region received very little rainfall. Additionally, the swampy marshlands around the lower Tigris and Euphrates rivers were not ideal for farming, and a few places which were suitable for farming were subjected to regular flooding. After irrigation, it became the most densely populated area on Earth. The Samarra culture, to the south of the Halaf, shows the earliest evidence of irrigation. That technology spread south to the Ubaid culture, which mastered the ability to control the river and cultivate previously unusable land. The Ubaid population grew rapidly, and either through migration, war, or peaceful cultural influence, their material culture replaced the older cultures of northern Mesopotamia. During the Ubaid period, signs of a ruling class seemed to develop around the temple administrative centers. There, the management of a growing population, food stockpiles, manufactured goods, and livestock were
So the Ubaids, would we consider that the first great civilization then?
administered. The quantities of these became large enough where a good memory was not enough to keep track of it all. Throughout the Copper Age in Mesopotamia, increasingly complex clay accounting tokens were used. Early tokens came in a variety of shapes and sizes, with meaningful marks on them. Later tokens had pictographic characters. These were used to denote ownership of a resource, like this token, which is believed to represent 10 goats or sheep.
Whoa.
Some were also used to label the contents of a container to indicate what was inside.
And they have holes in them. Is that to put on a string to count, perhaps?
Later, more symbols were added to represent personal names and professions. Writing continued to develop during the following Uruk period. Transactions, contracts, and other types of records began to be kept on tablets. Uruk, the city for which the period is named, had a staggering population for the time, estimated to have been as high as 80,000 people.
That's a lot of people in an area this age.
Eridu was another important city of the period. It grew from a small Ubaid settlement into a large city. The later Sumerians believed that Eridu was the first city in the world, and it was the first city to have a king. For more than
That we know of.
2,000 years, Eridu would be a major religious center, where Mesopotamian kings paid tribute to the city's patron god Enki. Through trade and possibly war, Uruk's influence spread throughout Mesopotamia and beyond. Mesopotamia's ravenous demand for more copper incentivized longer distance trade routes than ever before. Even in far-off Egypt, in the age before the pharaohs,
It's not even that far off.
Mesopotamia produced or influenced pottery and artifacts found there. During the Copper Age, the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt fought against each other in many forgotten wars. But the legacy of these two warring states lived on for thousands of years in the ancient Egyptian pharaoh's crown, which was a combination of the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. Even though the pre-dynastic Egyptians knew how to smelt copper by the mid-4th millennium BC, they had no domestic sources of copper, and the nearest source were the mines in the Sinai Desert. Controlling these mines was always a top priority once ancient Egypt's two kingdoms united. Much of the copper ore from the Sinai had trace amounts of arsenic in it, which made it harder. Copper, which contains more than 1% of arsenic, is called arsenical bronze. The addition of arsenic makes copper much harder and stronger. Undoubtedly, the first arsenical bronze was made by accident, because the arsenic naturally occurs in some copper ore. But this accident did not go unnoticed. By the end of the Copper Age, arsenical bronze had become standard, as humans figured out that adding arsenic made the copper stronger.
Very interesting. So accidentally happening, as do a lot of technological innovations do, occurs. We're so smart as a species, we catch on to this, either through demonstration or testing or so forth, we realize a hypothesis of why it's doing that. We create it, without knowing it, we do a probably a scientific method experiment of this, and then we replicate it, and it standardizes itself. Beautiful.
This superior metal had the inferior side effect of being extremely toxic. This must have motivated many early blacksmiths to look for a substitute that wasn't so toxic and also made copper stronger. After generations of experimenting, it was discovered that tin, a much more rare metal, made bronze, which was stronger, harder, and can hold an edge better than any metal that had come before it. Like copper had done before, bronze drastically increased humans' productivity. In Mesopotamia, the Uruk period slowly transitioned into the early Sumerian dynastic period. It is important to note that the delineation of time between Ubaid, Uruk, and Sumerian often overlap.
So we got the Ubaid, 6500 BC to 3800 BC, kind of overlaps, like you said. The Uruk period, 4 to 31. At an intermediate period, usually that just means we don't really know, like it's like a bleed. It's kind of there's a gap. And the early Sumerian dynastic period, around 2900 BC.
As they are modern scholarly constructs, and it is unclear and people use different definitions of when time periods begin and end.
Right.
And their utility comes from their ability to compartmentalize and make sense of this very complicated time. The Sumerian period saw larger cities, more powerful kings, and a more developed writing system, where a chronological timeline of historical events can more easily be assembled. To the Sumerians, the Copper Age became a time of myth and legend, where kings walked with gods, and epic events brought about civilization. As bronze technology spread throughout Eurasia, ancient Egypt lingered behind in the Copper Age for a few more centuries. This video has been sponsored by copper. If you buy some, you can smash a zinc penny with it. And I would like to thank my fantastic patrons over on Patreon. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe.
Love this guy, man. I appreciate the recommendation. We started this channel when we watched the history of the Sassanids, and I've been hooked. That's why I love your guys' recommendations. Sometimes it takes me a while to get around to them because I do get a lot. We got YouTube, we got email, we got Discord. There's a bunch, but I primarily look at Discord and the YouTube comments. I do appreciate all the recommendations because this is awesome to learn, right? So, we had the Stone Age, which kind of like I said, kindles civilization with animal husbandry as well as like agriculture, especially like in the Fertile Crescent around this area. And then irrigation really helps that as well in the Copper Age. And the Copper Age allows for a more malleable but recyclable but durable material that can enable us humans to be more productive because it's not going to break as fast. It's going to give us, the easiest parallel to this is Minecraft, right? I know you might be like, what are you talking about? But like, look, if you use a stone pickaxe versus an iron pickaxe, I know there's something between there that's not, I don't know if it's even in the game yet, but nevertheless, stone pickaxe is going to break a lot quicker. So same thing here, stone shovel or stone hoe or whatever you want to use, it's going to break faster. But in the inverse, a copper one's going to be a little bit stronger. And then maybe don't use arsenic because you might not have good effects with that, but implementing tin and copper creates bronze, and now it's even more durable. So, of course, you'll have the Bronze Age collapse with trying to replicate that, and you'll get iron. But it's just a very interesting time here where you have a lot of like great ideas, but you have to continuously survive. You have a material that you want to use. There's commerce, there's trade, there's communication. There's so much happening, and it's a lot of happenstance, like doing the the copper arsenic mixture to create a more hardened material to give you maybe an intermediate period of doing that. That was happenstance, and it's just part of life and part of the human story. Appreciate you guys. Hope you have a great one. Peace out. Bye bye.